Hi and welcome to our Unreal Engine meetup. This month we want to talk about building the standards. So we want to do some housekeeping stuff. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm going to try and flick through this pretty quickly because we want to move along. And we've also got a contribution from someone, a game that Paul would like feedback from, so we'll get into that. So with this, we're going to be talking about textures and materials, meshes, asset naming conventions, artistic styling, and modular grid system. Textures. Okay, so with our textures, we want to keep them all square. And so because we're developing for mobile, everything is a bit more stringent than just developing for a PC game. And so we're following the rules pretty closely. Now, with a typical game, you don't have to make your textures perfectly square, but it helps, or you want them to be in a power of 2. So if you follow the 512 by 512, or what you can see there, those rules, that is great. But don't ever exceed 2048. And we want to use smaller texture sizes where the quality of the material is not too noticeable. I'm going to flick over into our project. Now, when you clone the project from GitHub through your Git Kraken, which I've got open here, you'll clone the project, open it up, and you'll see this empty project scene. All you need to do is open up the map, open level, and I've called this one asset field. So when we open up that, now you'll see the fun stuff. You'll see some of the contributions made. And first we're going to look at this gun here. So take a good look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Look at the, where the missiles come out. And we've even got a logo for the aliens or their planet, what represents them or their defense system force. And this is the work of John. So we should give John a big round of applause now for contributing this to the game project. Thank you, John. And as a thanks from all of us and Unreal Engine, we want to give you a Epic Games lanyard and a thing that you can put your credit card in, which has Unreal all plastered over it. So thank you, that's our thanks. And if you contribute something to this project, we want to sort of give you some praise and give you something, and we'll be getting shirts made up and other things like that. So swag is really what we want to be on about. Okay, so we're going to, actually, just for fun, I'm going to hit play and turn on the volume. All right, I have to get closer to the actor. All right, yes. So, there we are. Now look at that. Get a bit closer. So this has Nigel's generator, 2 generators, 1 inverted, and we've made a flying machine with that. And I've just knocked this together with some of those assets, so I didn't have to create anything. And I don't want to be creating a whole bunch of stuff. This is a community project, so we want to encourage you guys to be building this stuff. And so this stuff here, what you see is stuff that you have built. And we've put it together. You can see it works. And so this here is an alien drone searching for the humans who have landed on the planet. So you don't want to be in the way of that laser. Pretty cool, huh? Stop on that. And there are some other things in this level that I'm going to show you, but we'll just move along. Wait. My point of coming to here was to show you this. Now, you can see the texture quality on that box here would suggest to me that that box is like a filler for the distance. You know, the actor is not going to come too close to it, so we're happy with that quality. And that brings me back to this point here. You can use smaller texture sizes where it's something like that in the distance, and it's just filling up to build the environment and the context of that environment. That makes sense, right? Let's move on.
Just a quick question. Would you prefer that lots of those kinds of assets are packed onto one texture? That's slightly bigger texture?
Yeah. Reduce draw balls.
Cool. Yeah, so we would pack them on there to reduce draw calls. Now, if we're bringing in textures, we want to just make sure that we've got these settings set up. Now, these are set by default, so unless you get in there and mess around, you won't have a problem. But if we look here for a texture that we've got, now I've got all of my engine assets showing in here, so I can hide them by going to View Options and unchecking them. I don't need to see them. I just want to see the assets that we've been building. Okay, so this is an example of a diffuse texture that we've imported. And on the top, you can see up here we've got the image size and compression settings. So that's by default, and we want to just leave it at that. Also make sure your sRGB is enabled. So that was also on that texture property box. If you're importing textures which are not mesh specific, and I'll give you an example of that. So if we go back into our project, and we'll close this down, and let's look at the gun. That's a good example. Okay, so this texture here that John has built for us, it's specifically for that gun. We can't use it anywhere else. Well, maybe if you're creative. But the point of this is, when you build an asset, you want to bring all of your textures and materials and meshes and everything all in the one place. But if you're creating a material which could be used elsewhere, then you can put it in Content Project Material Library. So later on, we're going to talk about our housekeeping rules for where we put files, and that is part of that system at play. So with materials, we want to be really super simple with materials. We're not going to be too complex. We're not going to be way out there. And that's because we're all about performance. Mobile devices, some of them can't really hack it. So we're going to say no more than 5 texture samplers. And if you think that's really tight, well, we want to use 2. Okay, we really don't want to get up to using even 4. If we can use 2, 3, and keep it around about there, we're happy. That makes the likelihood of our game working, and also your job simpler. But what if you want to scale a texture size? So typically when we scale textures, we use a texture coordinate. So that's that little red node there, and it's driving the size of these textures. And so it outputs a different size texture. So if you have like a brick and you want to change the scale of that brick, it's perfect for that. Now this is what you'd typically do, but we don't want to do that. We're going to do something different. The better way is to run your texture coordinate node into a customized UV. Has anyone done this before? Have you done it the previous way before? Yeah. I often do this with my work, and now with mobile, I'm thinking this is now the way that we have to do it. Now, this quote here is from Unreal. Everything in the pixel shader on mobile is evaluated with half-precision floats. This causes blocky-looking textures and some other artifacts. When pixel shader math is done on texture coordinates. The customized UV inputs, however, are done with full precision, so they get around this problem. Now, what does that kind of mean? Okay, well, if we're in the scene, out of the two shader types, pixel shaders and vertex shaders, what is doing the most work currently? Every pixel in this scene is having to be drawn. So even if we're looking at this, you can see the little pixels down there, the black little dots down there. So all of that has to be drawn. Now, if we go to wireframe, well, look at that. So between a vertex shader and a pixel shader, you can clearly see that the vertex shader is not doing anywhere near as much work. It just has to draw these triangles. So that's the theory here. That is where we're directing the processing to be done by using a customized UV. And all that means is when you're creating your material, and we can do that here, we'll just go into Material Library, make a new material, follow our conventions, which we'll talk about in a minute, and we'll just call this test. And if anyone here hasn't yet built a material in Unreal, this is how it's done. It's very easy once you know what you're doing. We can just press T and left click to get our texture node. Come on. Or you can right click if that doesn't work and just go, whoa, texture, sample. There we are. That'll do the job. And I know we have a texture in here for carbon fiber, so we'll use that one. And we can just copy that one because we had some problems with our shortcut. And let's say we want to make this one our normal map. Okay, so once again, we'll just start typing the name of the texture and it will bring it up. So the diffuse is like the color information, and that goes here into base color and the normal map, and that builds that 3D effect when you're looking at the material, and when the light is moving across it, you can sort of see that it looks 3D, and that's through the normal map. And now when we look at this little previewer, you can see that that's a really big carbon fiber texture. And when we're building for mobile, you might have your textures and you want to sort of scale that texture to suit. So to fix that, we're going to select the material node. And over here in the information details, under the material, you've got to drop this to get some more options. And you'll see number of customized UVs. So let's just bump that up to 1. Okay, so now when we add the, that shortcut is working now. So if you press U and then left click, you'll get the texture coordinate. So if we make the value 2 for the U and the V tiling, and then port that over into customized UV, look at that. Our texture on this cube has condensed. And so we can tweak that however we like, and that is a very performant way of adjusting texture scales for mobile. There you go. And making a carbon fiber material. Now with a material like that, it might be very useful for another asset that someone else is working on. So in which case, please put that in the material library folder here. Clear as mud. Static meshes. All right. Now, you know that we want to be very performant with our mobile developing, and really the big thing that you need to look out for static meshes is just the number of triangles on that thing. Reduce that if you can. But you don't want to sort of have to compromise too much. If your object is something in clear, close sight, and you need to have the details, well, sometimes you just have to throw lots of triangles on it. And that's just how it has to be. But there are things you can do. And it's just important to keep that in check. And obviously, you don't want to ever go over 65,000 vertices. That is the limit for Unreal. And in a scene such as this, we don't want to ever have more than 700,000 triangles. And to find out, we can go up to Window and Statistics. And in here, you will see how many triangles we have in this scene. It's this one here. Where is it? Can someone see it? Well, with each static mesh, here is, okay, so that's the total there. Sorry, I couldn't see that for a minute. It's inverted. So 590,000 triangles we have in this scene currently. And you can see for each static mesh what that value is. But it's times by how many static meshes of that type are in the scene. So with that turret gun of John's, that's a total of 203,000. So we might have to do something about that, and we can. So that's something to keep in mind when you're modeling your meshes. We know that already. And yes, speaking of something that you can do, it's the level of details. So if we wanted to look at, I don't know, John's gun. And let's just have a look at this in wireframe. So you can see it's quite busy. It's yellow just because I have it selected. But yeah, around here it's really busy. We can go to optimization view modes and look at the quad overdraw. And when we zoom out, you'll see where the big green areas are. That's the areas of concern. So yeah, okay, we want to do something about that gun. So we'll go back to lit. I'm going to open up this piece. And we can now look at our level of detail settings over here. So there are some presets with Unreal Engine. And you can make your own, or you can toy around with the ones that they already have. Let's just try this one. But first, we want to see the wireframe. Okay. Is that clear enough on your screen? And if we adjust that to high detail, we'll just say yes to that. Just look up the top here. It's 26,000 vertices just currently. If this doesn't crash it, we'll see what happens when we zoom out. All right, look at that. So when you're right up close, it's 40,000 triangles. We zoom out slowly, it will drop. 20,000, 10,000, and all the way to, well, 1,200. I don't know if we'll get any lower than that. Who would care? Let's hit save. And let's just look at the visual quality of that mesh now. Let's see if that spoils it for us. Well, here it looks fantastic. As we zoom back, looks fine. I can notice a few little things changing with it, but it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Keep going back. Who would be happy with that? That's a good outcome. So level of details is something that you want to apply to your static meshes when you bring them in and test them out. All right, so the style guide. Someone on our Discord channel suggested that we use the Allah style guide. And that is like a naming convention system. And it's like the housekeeping. It's like where we put our files and how they're arranged and stuff like that. And what it means is everyone can easily jump into a project and understand it. So if you're finished with this one that we're working on and you go into a project somewhere else and they're using the same kind of style guide, it's easy, right? You know where to find stuff. You know how to name stuff. No one's going to knock on your door. Now, these are some principles that are set out by the guy who, I guess, put this together. They're kind of interesting to read. All structure, assets, and code in any Unreal Engine 4 project should look like a single person created it, no matter how many people contributed. So that's that point. Friends, do not let friends have bad style. Okay? Does anyone remember watching Perfect Strangers? So Balky would often say, I forget. It's been a while. He'd say, don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous, cousin. So if you see someone doing something in this project that's ridiculous, you can tell them, don't be ridiculous. You can use Balky's voice. So we want to be following that. Oh yeah, don't break the law, okay? So don't pull images off the web that are clearly copyrighted. We don't want to see them in the game. We want to see original content. So stuff that you create, let's chuck that in there instead. So we're talking about the naming structure, and this is really what it is. You put your prefix at the beginning, your base asset name, and you can see how here we've got each different word capitalized. Makes it easier to read, right? If everything's just lowercase, it's just one big word. Then the variant, and then the suffix. So some examples for a material, M underscore tree bark underscore, and then the type. All right, makes sense? And just for a normal map, you'd end that with an N. Okay, so for a diffuse texture, we would end that with a D for diffuse. Now here are the common uses for that. So blueprint, BP underscore the name of the blueprint. There's your material. Static mesh, I used to always use SM. Some people use S. I guess with this project we'll use S. I'll change my ways. Art styles. Okay, so with this, we've already had some wonderful contributions, and we're not going to tell those people, hey, we want to go cartoon now, so you're going to have to just get into Substance Painter and redo it. We're not going to tell that to someone. John spent probably hours on that gun. Probably not, probably 10 minutes. So we're going to run with that. What he has done is good for us. We're happy with it. And like this box here, this was done by Nigel. Beautiful, right? So the style here seems to be heading in the direction of realism. We want to impress people. And we're using Unreal Engine, of course. We want to impress people. And why not? We can make things look realistic, right? And that's the point here. We're community driven. But at the end of it, when we play the game, we will get a feel for it. And we'll be like, well, maybe I can tweak this bit to sort of look a bit more realistic, or maybe the whole overall thing will change a bit. We'll just see how we go. Now, can everyone, just for a moment, imagine what an alien looks like? No?
From South.
Look, if you're not thinking of that, I think you're lying. Because that is just what comes into my mind, and I think it has to be coming into everyone else's mind, right? Honestly. But I want us to think outside the box. I really want us to think about what alien life could be like, what the planet could be like. We're not just creating meshes and building a mobile game. We're really having to think about the details. Do they have buildings on their planet? And what kind of materials do they use? Are they the same kind of proportions that we are? Here they're kind of the same. They've got the big heads and stuff. I've seen people who look like that. So they might end up looking like that. That might be an alien, you know, like a hex bug. So just think about that. The flora and fauna, gravity, is that something we're going to have to deal with? Are we going to have to add physics to this and sort of really tweak them because we're on another planet? Okay. Now, our modular grid system, it's going to make your life easier when you're playing around and building the level. It's fun to build because when you build something for this, you know that other people who come along and have to manipulate your meshes are going to have fun doing it. So I'm no Maya expert. I've only jumped into that program over the past 2 weeks. But I managed to get this panel made up, okay? So I guess it was inspired from sitting on a plane or something. And then the bulkhead above, probably from sitting on a Logan City bus. But they're the panels that work with our system. And that's because they follow the dimensions. And these systems are going to be suitable for buildings, fences, all of those things, but especially spaceships. So that panel that you saw there is really a component of a spaceship. And we're not going to use that in the game, all right? That's just an example. You guys can do better. So for things that clearly don't need to follow this grid system, obviously it's a non-issue. So that box we saw before, the yellow box, phones, can openers, inflatable pets. We heard Christina wants to bring some inflatable pets. Well, we're not going to do that to a grid system. Get real. So these are the dimensions of our grid system. 1 meter by 1 meter. How easy is that? So if you're modeling up something in Maya or 3ds Max or whatever, just make sure that it's a multiple of 1 meter in height, width, length. If that can't work, because sometimes it can't, just make it a 100 mil increment, okay, or 10 centimeters. So we've got like the macro grid, which is 1 meter, and then the micro, which is 10 centimeters. And so that's how I built this panel. It is 1 meter by 1 meter, like looking at that floor panel there. And the exception is the height, because I didn't want to have this 3 meters high. I wanted it to be 2,700 high. And so that's when we're jumping back into the 100 millimeter increments. All right? And I'm just going to demonstrate that really quickly in here. So with this panel, if I want to copy it and move it along, it's just a matter of me coming up here to the scale, and I can change it to 10 or 100. Now I know this panel is 1 meter in width, so I'll click on 100 centimeters. If I hold down Alt and drag along the X-axis, I'm copying that along. And it's perfectly aligned to the panel behind it. So I can just keep that sucker going. And that's what I've done along here. You can see I've had a lot of fun copying. And I've done the same with the ceiling panels. It's kind of rewarding. But that's how that system works, and the same for the floor. Now you can see that I've built this floor of many different meter square pieces. Well, if you know that this hallway is going to be 16 meters long, you can just make that one panel 16 meters long. But you know, it's still a multiple of a meter. So that's the point of that. Easy as, right? Now, in your modeling program, make sure that the piece has its gizmo set to a corner or a transform. Make sure it's snapped to that, and then you bring it to the center of the scene, so that'll be in world space 0, 0, 0, so that when you export that and you bring it into Unreal Engine, it means that your gizmo will be at that very point, and that will allow you to use this system. If that's off even slightly by a few mil, it's not going to work. It's going to look bad. Okay, you know about that. Keeping the project optimized. Okay, so these are some of the questions we need to ask ourselves as we go. And this is, as you know, a community project. So we want your feedback as we go. We realize you're going to come up with some ideas, and we don't want to be driving the ideas. I'm just throwing some ideas out there, and then you guys have to say, yeah, no, this is what we want. Let us know. We want it to be driven by you guys. And that includes the style of the game. We have to be thinking about our target mobile devices. And so for that reason, I can't just give you a list of everything for the settings that you need to put into your editor, because there are so many different devices out there that we need to put a bit of thought into that. And that's where you need to maybe get on our Discord channel and just say, you know what, I still have a Nokia, and I don't want you guys to forget about me, all right? So we'll have to take everyone into consideration, your suggestions. We're going to do some research. So this isn't just building a game, but we're going to do market research. And part of that market research is understanding what people are using. If you're curious and you want to jump in your editor and see what it will look like on a mobile device, you can do that. So to do that, settings. And preview rendering level, you can just jump down here and select default mobile or Android preview or Apple. Now, if I were to hit those, it'll say compiling shaders, and we'll be staring at that for 20 minutes. So I'm not going to do that. But you can try that out. And I did before, and it didn't look too bad. I, once again, was admiring the guns, and I didn't notice too much of a lack of luster. Okay, so we were looking at this just before, and you probably won't need to be using this a lot if you're just creating meshes. But overall, as the level builds and comes together, you want to see what the effect is for the entire environment. And that's when you can come in here to optimization view modes and just try them out. Shader complexity and quads, I like this one. Lots of green makes me happy. Red and green, it's kind of jolly. But that's what you want to see. And if you see a lot of red around the place, and sometimes that happens, I've had projects which are mostly red, and even up to white. White, extremely bad. You don't want white. And what can bring white is masked materials. If you have a tree and you've made a material that's masked, so you've got your, like your diffused part of the material is the leaf, right? And everything else around it is transparent. It's extremely wasteful. It's very bad for performance, and on a mobile device, it's sometimes unacceptable. So you'll notice I think it's on here, the Sun Temple demo built by Unreal Engine. If you walk around that building in there on a high-end Android device, it works fine. But if you look at the window, and if you look out the window, you'll see the trees in there. And those trees, they have the overlapping leaves with the masked materials on them, and it's just white. So they say that if you look out that window at that tree, you might crash. Okay? So now you know. And if you're developing for mobile, be very, very wary of using materials that are translucent. We'll move on. Questions? Do we have any questions?
Are we going to start to touch on, once we've established the state towards the end of the game, or progressively, about taking a few steps back to optimize?
Yeah, I think that's going to happen as we go. So along this journey so far, we want to understand what a good mesh is. And so as people create meshes, we'll look at them, and if we can see that a mesh is unacceptable, if it's just like someone's gone ahead and done a Moreton Bay fig tree, and it's just, ridiculous, we're going to let you know, but we're going to do it very graciously. And we're going to probably look at many ways of reducing the triangles on that tree. So we'll look at maybe doing something in Maya or 3ds Max to reduce it. That's where you want to do it first. You want to do your best in those programs. And then when it comes over into Unreal Engine, then you can use your level of details. But the point is, give it a go. We want people to give it a shot. Even if what they end up submitting is not something we can use, we'll done right try to make it work. And we will. So,
is there a point where you think we can confidently set sort of a poly count per asset? Because we might expect that eventually we're going to have 100 static or dynamic meshes in there at any one time. So therefore the math equals this many per asset. Is that?
yeah, I guess. Yeah, if we have something which needs to be multiplied over, like if you just have, like grass, for example, I guess that's one challenging mesh to have in a scene because you have so many of them. And so you've got to use level of details, you've got to have them cull, you've got to have them disappear at a certain length completely sometimes. We have to really play it as we go and then use the optimizations in the view modes to just see what works, and also keep an eye on frame rates, because in the end we're just going to have to try things out, because we'll come across things that we won't really get answers to. So this is where we have to try. There'll be a lot of trial and error. There might be tears, but at the end of it, I assure you there'll be tears of joy. Any other questions? Cool. All righties.